In 2014, director Damien Chazelle and star J.K. Simmons gave the world an emotionally devastating exploration of what it takes to achieve greatness.
In 2024, we try a rye that could be in class with Miles Teller.
The film is Whiplash.
The whiskey is Sazerac Rye.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And Brad, it is week number 5 of season number 9 here on Film and Whiskey. This season, what we're doing is we're looking at films from the last 20 years, and we're considering whether or not they deserve to be called modern classics. These are films that have either shown up on the IMDb Top 250, the Letterboxd Top 250, have grossed $100 million at the U.S. box office, or have been nominated for Best Picture, or some combination of those categories. And I believe our movie for today, Whiplash, which is just celebrating its 10th anniversary, checks 3 of those boxes? It didn't check the box office box, but I think it's in all the other 3.
I was going to say, I think it's pronounced Whiplash.
Whiplash. Yeah, yes. That's correct. I forgot the emphasis over the H.
Yeah, if the marketing team had done a better job, it probably would have made more money if it was known as its proper pronunciation.
Yeah, sure.
But Bob, I am not in awe that this didn't make a lot of money. Like, when you look at the lineup of Best Picture nominees for this year, it's a wild time. It's going up against juggernauts like American Sniper. What were a few of the other ones? Because as I was looking at it,
I thought for 2 seconds that you'd actually done your research, and you were like, "Listen to this list," and then you named one movie and said, "What are the other ones?"
I trust you, Bob, to know the other nominees.
Oh man, okay, let's see.
I'm giving you a chance to shine.
Well, let's see. Off the top of my head, the winner of Best Picture this year was Birdman. Which means it was also up against the movie Boyhood. It was up against this movie. It was up against American Sniper. Maybe The Imitation Game was this year? No, The Theory of Everything must have been this year. I don't freaking know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this was a good year for movies, and Whiplash, maybe the best one? Question mark?
Oh, far and away the best one.
You think better than Birdman? Better than American Sniper?
Oh, I love both of those movies, Bob. This is a better film.
You know what's really cool about this movie, Brad, and we'll get into other things we need to get into in a second here, but they literally, right after we announced the lineup of movies for this season, I pulled up my Regal app one night because I wanted to go see a movie and I wanted to see what was playing, and they were doing a Whiplash 10th anniversary re-release, and I was like, hell yes. I went right that night and watched this movie in theaters. This thing still plays like gangbusters, dude. I'm so glad I saw it in the theater again. It was freaking awesome.
Yeah, and this is not quite. It is almost in the halls of the storied 90-minute movie. It's like barely an hour and 40 minutes, which, like, I'll give it credit. If a movie ends at 1:39, I'll call it a 90-minute movie.
Sure.
Not quite there, but man, oh man, this film moves so fast and has zero fat on it, and I want to see it in theaters so badly, Bob.
Every time I return to this movie, and so over the last week or so since I went to the theater and saw it, I've been thinking about what I want to say on this episode, and I keep thinking I need to go back and listen to the first time we recorded this, because surely this is a revisit episode for us. Somehow we made it to season 9 without talking about Whiplash, Brad, so it's kind of crazy. But it makes me feel kind of nostalgic and puts me in that like season 1 mode of Film and Whiskey. And What's even crazier is that you told a story about your first time seeing this movie, and it included a name that listeners of this show have not heard since season 1. Brad, why don't you clue us in a little bit to who our guest is today?
Bob, today we are bringing the absolutely illustrious, one of my greatest friends in the world, has seen me through thick and thin, Jordan Andrew McCain.
Jordan.
Wow.
How you doing, man?
Doing good. I thought this was a podcast for Drumline. That's what I watched to get ready. Is that not? That's not correct.
That would be a perfect let's make it a double, though.
That it sure would.
Oh, okay.
That's the one
Nick-
for Drumline.
Nick Cannon is good.
Nick Cannon's good. Nick Cannon probably had kids in Miles Teller's class in this movie, too. So there you go.
Oh, man.
It's all connected somehow.
Cannot comment.
Jordan,
So good.
we literally have not seen or heard from you since season 1, so I'm glad that the missing persons report we filed worked. You're home safe, everything's going well. Here's the backstory of Jordan being in season 1. Brad and I decided to start a podcast, and we said, hey, let's record some episodes together. And this was in the pre-using Zoom as a socially acceptable means of recording days. And so
I think we recorded on like a speakerphone, like
we did a conference call microphone. That's all we had to record
conference
on.
call mic.
The first 4 episodes of Film and Whiskey were recorded in a church basement, and Brad showed up on the day with Jordan and was just like, hey, Jordan's coming. He's just going to hang out and work while we do 8 hours of recording today.
I'm
None of us had kids.
No, yeah, that's true. I would say I'm pretty sure I let you know that Jordan was going to record with us. I might not have.
No, what you said was Jordan is coming, but he's totally cool with just working while we record. And so we were like, I said, dude, absolutely not. I'm not going to make him sit over in the corner and listen to us ramble about 4 movies. So Jordan was our first guest host on 2 of the first 4 episodes. I believe it was 12 Angry Men and Inglourious Bastards. So, dude, you are like 3 for 3 on picking great movies to join us for.
These are these are a lot of my favorite movies. I was going to say, Brad, you bringing me along assuming I'm just going to do this. It's a very Terrence Fletcher move. It's just like, I'm going to make it happen. We're going to make greatness happen.
Yeah, I will say Jordan and I's relationship over the years has been tumultuous at times. And so I thought it appropriate that he come join us for Whiplash. If you recall, Jordan, you were a massive fan of Whiplash. Absolutely loved the movie. And every time our friend group in seminary would get together to watch a film, you would suggest Whiplash. And what was my response, generally?
Oh, you mean the movie with J.K. Rowling?
J.K. Rowling. What's crazy though is I think that J.K. Rowling has verbatim tweeted some of the things that J.K. Simmons says in this movie, so it really does all connect. Yeah,
I will F you like a pig.
Yeah, something along those lines. All right, guys, let's dive into talking about the movie itself. And in order to get that conversation going, it's time for our first segment of the day, which we call Brad Explains.
Brad's gonna give us the movie plot with only 60 seconds ticking on the clock. So let's go ahead and hear your take with this little segment that we call Brad Explains.
Brad Explains is the part of the show where Brad breaks down the plot of the film that he has just seen, often for the first time. Brad, what's the watch counter at on Whiplash for you?
Probably this was my 5th or 6th time.
Oh man, this is like at the upper reaches, the upper limits of the bell curve for you.
100%. Yeah, and honestly, like Jordan had tried to get me to watch it for probably 2 years before I finally sat down and watched it. Jordan, I don't remember. Jordan, is the first time I watched it, was it with you, or did I watch it on my own?
I think you watched it on your own.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, dude. I should have watched it with you.
Wow. Riveting stuff, guys. Okay. So Brad Explains. Brad, you have 60 seconds to break down the plot of this film. This is going to be full of spoilers, folks. So if you've not seen Whiplash, first of all, we've already given you our recommendation. You need to hit pause here, go watch the movie, and then rejoin us. Brad, 1 minute and go.
Whiplash, also known as Whiplash, is a film about a young drummer named Andrew Neiman who is at a prestigious music academy in New York City. His drug is being great, and J.K. Simmons plays his teacher, Terrence Fletcher, who is his drug dealer.
That's it, huh? That's what we're gonna.
Bro, if you haven't seen Whiplash, go watch it.
It's really good.
Like, it's an hour and 40 minutes, people. I just want you to watch this movie.
So, the director of this film, Damien Chazelle, kind of bursts on the scene with this movie. Chazelle is a trained jazz musician and filmmaker, and he carved out his little niche in filmmaking by making a short film version of Whiplash. That was kind of his proof of concept. He submitted it to a bunch of film festivals as a way of trying to secure funding for the full-length film. They actually got J.K. Simmons to be in the short film version of Whiplash. It's pretty cool. If you've never seen the short film, it's essentially that first extended sequence of Are You Gonna Be on My Time? And that's the movie. Really, really great little short film. Builds a lot of tension. And Chazelle pretty quickly establishes himself as a young master of the craft. He then goes on to make La La Land because they gave him a bunch of money. After La La Land, he makes his Neil Armstrong biopic, First Man. And then he makes Babylon, which was a colossal flop. And people are in interesting places on Chazelle now. I think that they still look at him as a guy with tremendous talent and the ability to take a big swing. But I'm going to be honest, I don't know if he's ever topped this movie. Like, this is such an economical movie, both in like how they spend the budget and in how there's no fat on this thing at all, that it's kind of hard to find a way to one up this movie. Even with a movie like La La Land that goes for excess, I don't know if it beats Whiplash for me, Brad.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever watched a movie on this podcast that has a more clear through line throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really can't think of many movies that are more dedicated to the main story, the main thrust of the film, and just never, ever strays from what the movie is all about, which makes sense because that is what the main character is doing throughout this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, trying to think of a movie that is as focused. Yeah, it would be it's in my top 10. It's one of those that really epitomizes a perfect story structure.
Mm-hmm.
And even, although I will say for me, because of the things it brings up in me, when I was even trying to draw the story structure of like, what is the climax of this movie? I'm not 100% certain because it's not supposed to be the end. But if you talk about the scenes that are like the best in this movie, you're like, is there anything other than the ending of this movie that is one of the greatest moments? Like, it is just so intense. And then it, bop.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
It's just hard to believe.
It's a perfectly structured story, but it doesn't follow like the 3-act structure. It doesn't have like the rise and fall kind of denouement at the end of the movie. It's more like a freight train that gets moving and then can't stop. And Chazelle even commented on how he wanted to make the original short film kind of echo a sense of dread that he had by being in this kind of high stakes jazz band, which is a hilarious sentence to say. I was in the high stakes jazz band. You don't understand, man. But dread is what this movie does really well. I watched this movie in theaters back in 2014 and I walked out of it and I remember posting like, this is the most terrifying movie I've seen in a long time. Like it's scary to watch how this movie brings up that sense of tension, of suspense, of dread within you. And it doesn't let up. And then depending on your interpretation of the ending, gets even more horrifying at the end of the film.
Also, the idea of posting like, Grandpa, tell us about what it was like to post on Facebook in 2014.
Do you remember when Facebook statuses used to like come with the word is pre-programmed? Be like, yes. Brad G is, and then you were supposed to finish the sentence.
Bob Book is afraid of J.K. Simmons.
100%, man.
Still to this day.
Okay, let's start talking about the film itself. I want to start with Miles Teller, who prior to this movie had really only made maybe one film that people had seen and started hyping him up for. It was a small indie movie called The Spectacular Now. He was really good in that movie, and then he comes out with this, and I remember walking out of this movie and thinking, like, that dude is going to be a movie star. And I think
And then he was in the Fantastic Four.
Fant Four Stick. It did not go well for him. I think partially because he has a low-key reputation for being kind of difficult. But then also he made a couple movies that just did not work. And his big return to form was supposed to be Top Gun Maverick, which was supposed to come out in, I think, 2019, and then got delayed by almost 3 years. So by the time Top Gun Maverick comes out, we really hadn't heard from Miles Teller on a major scale in a couple years. I would really like to see him kind of continue the momentum of Top Gun Maverick and find his footing again, because I do think that he's one of those young actors, similar to when we talked about Shia LaBeouf, Brad, that like he had the raw kind of rage within him that he could channel really, really well. And now that he's older, I want to start seeing him fine tune it. And I think he deserves to be a star. I just don't know, where do you guys kind of consider him in the Hollywood star tier ranking now? Would you consider him like an A-lister, or where would he fall in that kind of ranking?
Yeah, I would love to hear your reflections walking out that made you feel that way. He is not the I mean, as bad as it sounds, he's not the person I think about his acting when I walk out of this movie. Like, I think he's good, and in some ways he is the moon reflecting the sun. Mm-hmm. Like, he does a good job punching a drum and being very upset, and he even says that he's upset at a certain point. But I did not walk out thinking like, man, that guy is going to make it someday. It's just like, wow, this was a really good role for him, but wow, J.K. Simmons is a really good actor. Mm-hmm. That's all I could ever think about when I watch this movie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I'm kind of with Jordan on this one. Like, Miles Teller is very good in this movie. I think that he has a brooding intensity about him that like ramps up throughout the film. Until you get to the car crash sequence, which is almost feels reminiscent of our very first episode, the Goodfellas drug sequence. Mm-hmm. And I think Teller really knocks it out of the park here, but I am just going to say there's no better way to describe it. He is the moon reflecting the sun that is J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. I also think that watching a film of an up-and-comer 10 years ago and being able to identify, like, he's got it. This isn't it yet, but he's got it within him, is very different than now revisiting it after seeing him in more movies and kind of just improving his craft. I'm with you that there's a few scenes where I'm like, oh, he's still young. Like, he's still not quite there on J.K. Simmons' level. Even the I'm upset line, where when he's screaming it, it's like, oh, this is not believable. But aside from that, he has to be in every single scene of this movie. Like, there is no scene in the film that he is not in. Everything is told from his perspective. And I think for being on screen for the entirety of the film, he anchors it down pretty well. Because if he was going to be as big and over the top as J.K. Simmons is, this movie would not work. It would just be a shouting match.
Yeah, I think that he has a talent for holding back until the very end. There's just little moments that you want him to be a better actor. But I guess when you look at his overall career, because that's where this conversation kind of started, Bob, I don't know if I've ever thought of Miles Teller as a great actor. Like, other than Whiplash, I've never seen him in something and gone, man, that guy's going to be a movie star. And if I'm being blunt with you, Bob, it's because he's like an above average actor with below average looks. And that, like, if that's a recipe for success in Hollywood, then I don't know what we've been watching for 100 years.
It is pretty funny, the bar that we set for people's looks in Hollywood, though, because I think he is a generally good-looking guy. He's just not movie star handsome. He's not Glenn Powell. You know what I mean? Like, you put him next to Glenn Powell. Go ahead.
Sure.
Sorry.
I would say he's no Jordan McCain. We'll just put it that way.
He is
Whiplash
no
with Glenn Powell, that could be something. That could be a crazy remake.
Glenn Powell could have been like the Irish guy that's like the third up on the drums that he makes fun of. That would have been a perfect Glenn Powell role.
I love the line because it reveals like a lack of self-awareness for Fletcher, J.K. Simmons' character. But I love the line when he goes, Connolly was just a tactic to get you motivated. Mm. It's like, Yeah, man, we all got it.
we were there. We saw it. So I think that this could really quickly devolve into all of us just saying how good J.K. Simmons is over and over and over. And it would be deserved if we did that for him. But I think I just kind of want to talk around the character for a little bit. This is a character that I don't think we should reduce down to he is a villain or he does bad things or whatever, because there are elements of his character that are legitimately, like, some of the insults he says are the funniest things I've ever heard anybody say. Like, he is clearly inflicting emotional abuse upon so many people, but then you're like, God, man, this guy is so good at insulting people. Like, when the fat trombonist is looking down at the ground and he's like, what do you, there's not a fucking Mars bar down there. Like, it's the best line in the movie. I love it.
I think the thing that I am most fascinated by is the philosophy that he puts forth and so clearly believes in, and the charisma that he utilizes to enforce that philosophy is like fascinating. And the more I thought about Jordan joining on this episode, the more I was like, I feel like he is the perfect person to talk about how dangerous and flawed having a philosophy such as Terrence Fletcher's, that the only way to get greatness is to ridicule it into existence, to demand it into existence, to
you're
violently, right? Like,
you're challenging it. You're trying to coax it out of someone by needling them into showing it, essentially.
Yeah. And Jordan, I'm going to throw you either under the bus or maybe up on top of it like a champion. I think you should talk about that, because I think that, yeah, your wisdom in the area of Terrence Fletcher's philosophy on greatness would be greatly appreciated.
I mean, I'm from Indiana, and Bobby Knight's our hero, so that's the only way to go, in my opinion, is that's how you create great people.
Listen, the results speak for themselves, man.
100%. 100%. No, I mean, that is the thing about trials and tribulations, or however you want to put it. Trauma really is what it is. Like, we're all from the Midwest. And so I remember, I have no experience with jazz. And as three white men, we can all just acknowledge that this maybe isn't our area of expertise. But I remember watching this for the first time and being like, hey, somebody goes, this is a jazz drumming movie, you should watch it. And I'm like, sweet. So they're in this beautiful, stately practice area. And then J.K. Simmons begins saying things I've heard, like in my football locker room, right? Like, just like tearing these people apart. And I remember it brought me back very viscerally to moments of like, what's going to happen at the end of this pump up speech? Like, are these 18, 19-year-olds who are getting ready for the game, are they going to respond and yell and like go out there and kick butt? Or are they going to realize they're being verbally abused and roll over? And it's a fine line, because if you respond well to it, the ends will always seem to justify the means. And I think it's very accepted and normal. I think that gets old pretty quick, but it actually is, it can work really well when you're young and you just want it that badly. I think we all lose our tolerance for that as we age, would be my guess. I don't know what your guys' experiences have been.
I mean, I remember viscerally 9th grade basketball. We lost to, I think it was North Ridgeville, a team that we never should have lost to. And Coach Siciliano, this like 5'3", he said raging Italian man.
He said, "You lose at the game, you no get at a pizza." That's what he said, right?
He was very Italian. He had, do you know those like the mini water bottles that have like 4 ounces in them? Sure. He whipped one of those suckers against the chalkboard and it stuck in the chalkboard.
Oh.
He like hit it with the cap and it stuck in the chalkboard and he kept screaming.
And then he said, he said, "Did you know that Charlie Parker got a cymbal thrown at his head? This water bottle will bring out the greatness in you."
Exactly. Yeah. So 100%, man. I think the fascinating thing that this movie does is that it sets the backdrop of this older student who had been abused by J.K. Simmons against the story of Andrew Neiman. And so even as the film ends, this didn't happen to me the first time or even the second time, but the last few times I've watched this movie, as soon as the movie ends and Whiplash hits the screen, I think about that student who killed himself 5-6 years later. And I'm like, oh, Neiman is headed down that same track.
Oh, 100%. And so this is actually where I think the movie succeeds the most, is not in the scenes where he is humiliating people publicly. It's when he's kind of like working the back channels in between things, and he's trying to be buddy-buddy with Andrew and asking about his mom and dad. And then you come to find out 5 minutes later, he only cares about the mom and dad so that he can have ammunition to use. But that final scene that they have in the bar after Andrew has already, ratted him out, basically, there's such a weird combination of things he's saying to Andrew that are complete lies and things that are complete truths about himself. That's the scene where you get his philosophy about himself and his teaching style. And it's also the scene where he starts kind of stroking Andrew's ego again to get him to accept this invitation to play at the end of the film, which is all an elaborate ruse to sabotage Andrew one last time. It's freaking crazy. This guy is an absolute psychopath. But you buy into the world that they've created. And I think that this is kind of where I want to go for the next little segment, guys. 10 years on from the movie, I'm wondering, like, as I'm watching it, how is this aging? Like, does it feel a little dated in an era where we're like post Me Too now? And Me Too hadn't even happened when this movie came out. I just don't think anyone in this day and age with like Gen Z would get away with like slapping a student repeatedly in class. And so you kind of have to take off your 2024 goggles in those early scenes and either get on board with the world of this movie, which is slightly exaggerated, or it's not going to work for you. And I will say that, like, once I got on board with, you know what, whether this would happen in the real world, I think that they do a plausible enough job with, like, hey, everyone knows it's happening, but nobody will say anything. And once they kind of established that, I was bought in again. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, did you guys have that layer of disconnect from the movie this time around, or are you like all the way bought in from the beginning?
I don't know, man. I have heard enough stories now, and not just the Bobby Knights of the world that are big and famous. I've heard enough stories, and I've seen enough people like this. I've listened to the rise and fall of Mars Hill. I don't think this exaggerates anything.
Yeah.
Not to like completely contradict your point, Bob.
No, you're right. You're right.
Like, I think stuff like this happens way too often when you get these insular, insulated worlds where a narcissistic personality is allowed free reign because he does bring about greatness, and he brings home trophies from these competitions, and he produces some great musicians. It's like, okay, well, we're just, it's just Fletcher being Fletcher. I don't know. I never once thought that this was like an exaggerated world. It felt eerily too similar to a real world, for me at least.
I see both. I think I would agree with Brad that I imagine it's happening. I don't know if anything changes more than it just shifts in where it's located or what happens. So maybe it's not happening in this version of Juilliard or whatever their school is, but it's probably happening in small town, whatever, Ohio, right? Like, it's probably happening there. What I think is interesting that I think is different in 2024 is the thing I hear most consistently from people working with young folks when it comes to coaching or teaching is the level of like emotional resilience in young people is on such a decline that, like, I don't know how many students would even show up for this jazz club team, whatever it is, jazz band. That's how much I know about jazz. I don't know what it's called, but I don't know how many would show up after 3 sessions because they would be so discouraged so quickly that they would just quit. Now, again, that's also contextual situational, but that's like the most consistent thing I hear, even at college levels, is like kid strikes out, he goes to the dugout, and he thinks he's the worst baseball player who's ever lived, as opposed to just like, yeah, dude, you just struck out. Like that's what baseball is, you know? And it's just really hard to get them through those low points. I think actually the resilience for me feels crazy.
I'm going to be honest, man. It kind of sounds like you're making J.K. Simmons' point for him a little bit. That like, hey, if we're ever going to find the next bird, you got to throw some symbols. These kids are pansies.
That's not how you build resilience. You don't build resilience that way. J.K. Simmons is taking advantage of resilience that already exists. You know this. You're not arguing for it. But, you know, but he is taking advantage of whatever level of emotional maturity they have and then trying to strip it down and own it. And I just don't know how much of that even exists unless you're a pretty emotionally healthy family in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
You should see how many symbols Jordan throws at our church. It's just...
We go through so many. The budget for symbols each year is astronomical. So, guys, before we go to break, I want to talk a little bit about Andrew's kind of downward trajectory. And this time around, you know, it's always been there in the movie, and it's told like a horror story, and it's told, to Brad's point, like an addiction story. Like, you could pair this movie up with something like Requiem for a Dream, and it would make a super depressing but not at all dissimilar experience. And this time around, though, what I really found fascinating was how Andrew's, for lack of a better term, like assholishness, I don't want to call it sociopathy, but his inability to get in contact with his own emotions and feelings and ability to process what's going on with him and his decision to push people away. It's there in the early scenes of the movie, even before you kind of get into the downward descent. So that by the time he breaks up with his girlfriend, it's so callous, but he does it in a way that for him is just like, yeah, I'm going to lay out the facts. I'm super obsessed with this and I can't pull myself out of its clutches. And so like, we should not be together anymore. And what she responds to is like, what's wrong with you, dude? How can you talk like that and not feel anything? And I think the movie does such a good job of establishing, yes, Fletcher is horrible and manipulative, but Andrew's also the kind of guy that hears this philosophy and is like, oh, that makes total sense. That's me. I need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Andrew is like one giant trauma response. Like they said it from the start. His mother left them when he was a child, and everything from the movie flows from that. Like, he has zero empathy for others. He has zero compassion for others. And the only times he really gets emotional in the film are when he is getting the hit of the drug of like fighting for his dreams of greatness. And so this time through, I especially noticed it. He plays everything so deadpan outside of his drumming career that the only time he gets passionate is when he's at the dinner table with his family who doesn't understand him, and they are belittling him and don't understand his desires. That's when he gets passionate. When J.K. Simmons is like talking to him about his philosophy, he doesn't even get excited. He's still completely deadpan. It's not until he has the offer of drumming again that he starts to show emotion. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like, this is a very, very classic trauma story of a young man who has gone through a horrific, terrible thing of losing a mother and the results that happen from that.
They also do such a good job, though, of, at multiple points in the movie, giving Andrew these kind of inflection points where, for the audience, depending on how you want to read his character, his moments are either heroic or they're signs of his continuing decline into, like, madness. And that dinner table scene is such a good example because they set it up by his dad, who dotes on him, who gives him everything, getting made fun of himself by his brother or brother-in-law. And they say he overcooked something and he doesn't say anything and he's real meek and mild-mannered. And then the kid says something to Andrew And Andrew's like, absolutely not. I'm going to belittle you. I'm going to tell you that you're at a D3 school, that you will never play in the NFL. And
tell me that's not a great line, though. Just the way he quietly goes, it's Division 3.
It's a D3 school, yeah. But see, as an audience member, you're like, yeah, he's sticking up for himself. He's sticking up for his dad. But what's really happening there is he's, like, just taking it out on the poor guy. But also, he's just reflecting the exact type of challenge to that guy's greatness that he's been receiving from J.K. Simmons. And it's just really scary to see how that philosophy is being perpetuated.
And you see that when the core drummer and how he treats him as he loses the sheet music.
Are you talking about Great Value Ted Mosby?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. just making sure.
That's funny.
Yeah. That is a perfect description. I think his name is Tanner in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The way he belittles Andrew is exactly what J.K. Simmons does. And so, yeah, I love those moments where you're like, oh, this philosophy is completely permutating the little world that Fletcher has created at, the Schaefer Conservatory, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You notice, too, that, the way that cults work is they attempt to make you cut off all interaction with anyone outside of the group. And if you follow, like, the synergy of the conversation is J.K. Simmons slowly but surely makes fun of and mocks every outside relationship that Andrew has, including his dad and his mom, right? He learns just a little bit about his dad and then uses that to prove he's not good enough. And then if you actually track, it's funny you say that, Bob, that his dad dotes on him, because if you track their conversations, every single one ends with his dad disagreeing with Andrew's choices.
For sure.
Which makes for an interesting, like, okay, so my dad doesn't understand me, even though he's nice about it. So who is going to understand me and understand what I care about? It's going to be this guy.
Yep.
So normally there would be a triangle for Andrew to get out of this or to get some anxiety out of the system, but instead it always goes back to parents every time.
Yep.
It just keeps going back to him. And they're like inevitably drawn towards each other because of their focus. And it kind of creates this weird synergistic emotional, what do you call it? It's
codependency. Yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways.
And the very end of the movie, my favorite shot in the whole movie is, it might not be what you expect, but he's been embarrassed by Fletcher on stage. And his dad gives him a hug and he's like, come on, let's go home. And then Andrew breaks away and goes back. And again, as an audience member at first, you're like, yeah, he's going to go stick it to that guy. He's going to prove him wrong. And as Andrew gets into his solo and becomes something like otherworldly and not human anymore, like truly monstrous on stage, they cut back to his dad looking through the door and like literally like shrinking away in horror at what his son has become. And it's this great, because the whole movie, they've been painting this triangle of like, is he going to go with his dad or is he going to go with this other perverted father figure in Fletcher? And this is him fully embracing Fletcher. And then you get the end of the film where he hits the snare and looks up and it's this like hopeful, like, please accept me, dad look. And then you get that like demonic smile from Simmons and that's the end of the movie. And it's like, holy crap, dude, it is dealing with so many parasocial relationships, codependent relationships in a way that is just absolutely terrifying. Am I right in calling this a horror film of sorts?
Oh, dude, 100%. And I think the reason Simmons wins an Academy Award here is not just for all of the bombastic, ridiculous things that he does. It's for the moment that he picks up the symbol that Neiman has knocked over.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, the way he picks that up and looks at Neiman.
Oh, it's so weird.
As if
it's completely, it's like he has locked in on this guy as a peer and then they're just like broing out together. And it's almost creepier to see him being friends with this guy. It's a completely different character than you've seen the whole movie.
Well, it feels like almost like a maternal mothering, like here you go, here's your toy, I'm gonna take care of you, I'm here to nurture you. I can't communicate the ickiness that I felt watching him put that symbol back up. And like it's moments like that why you hire J.K. Simmons and why he wins an Oscar.
Yeah. Also, if you need pictures of Spider-Man, you can hire him too. Like those are really the two reasons you hire the guy.
You know who I think of? It hit me as we've been talking about him. I think of J.K. Simmons and Willem Dafoe in a very similar category of like some of the absolute best actors that we have that don't give an absolute rip about Academy Awards, about making money. They just love the craft of acting.
Well, guys, on that note, I think it's a good time for us to hit pause. Brad and I have to go drink some very pricey whiskey. And then after we're done doing that,
the horrors.
I'll tell you what, the things we do for you, Film and Whiskey Nation. After that, we'll come back and I'm going to give my Let's Make It a Double way early because I want to talk about it with you guys. Brad, what do you say we drink some whiskey?
I am ready, Robert. Let's get to it.
All right, today we are continuing our trip through last year's Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. We've now done 3 of them, which means we have 2 left, and the 4th one on our list is Sazerac Rye. Now, Brad, we have tried the much cheaper alternative to this Sazerac Rye, which is known as colloquially as Baby Saz. That's the one you can get for like $30. But because it's made by Buffalo Trace, even that is sometimes hard to find. We did that way back in like season 2 or 3. Yeah. So this is not that. This is the Sazerac 18-year whiskey. And this particular bottle is coming in at 18 years and 5 months old.
Wow.
Brad, so it was barreled in like May of 2005.
Dang. Think about the world in 2005, Bob.
I was finishing up my freshman year of high school.
Sure was. Yeah. Iraq going on. Kind of a big deal.
I like how it's not the Iraq war. It's just Iraq. Iraq was happening, you know?
It was
the
happening.
Nation of Iraq. Have you ever tried Sazerac Rye before, Brad? Like the big boy here.
I don't think I have. I think this is my first time in, and I'm curious about this 90 proof point.
Yeah, they water it all the way down to 90 proof. It's something they do every year. And that's probably because when you look at the fact sheet on this, because it's so old, 74% of the initial volume has been lost to evaporation. So only a quarter of the barrel is remaining. Frankly, they could probably sell this for more than they do, given how old it is. It was 135 proof off the still. Barrel entry proof was 125. So I have to imagine what was left in the barrel was like hazmat level. So they would have had to water it down anyway. But 90 proof, that's what we're working with here today, man.
Yeah, and based on what they do with the Stag and what did we have last week? The Weller. I'm like, I don't know. I think you probably could have kept it at 135 proof, and I would have been fascinated at what that whiskey tastes like.
All right, man, let's dive in. I'm really excited. I literally just poured this out, and as I'm pouring it into my Glencairn, I got a whiff from 2 feet away of honeydew and cantaloupe. This is super melon heavy. I'm going to let it kind of calm down a little bit in my glass while you give your nosing notes, Brad.
I think once it settles down, it actually mellows out into this really nice, there's brown sugar, there's cinnamon, there's like a freshness of the rye and mint flavors coming through. And it really just kind of reminded me of like a nice cinnamony raisin bread. With a little bit of that fruitiness coming in. I think this is an absolutely stellar nose. I'm going to give it a 9.5.
I like this a lot. There is something, like, it's really complex, and there is a significantly more aroma than I would expect from a 90 proof rye, and that is obviously due to it being 18 years old. There's a note in here that I can't quite put my finger on. It's that sort of yeastiness that we get on younger ryes. Not even like too young, like a 1 or 2 year old, but like a 4-year rye. And some of that is still hanging around here, which is really interesting to me because I would have expected this to be a much more kind of concentrated, potent nose. And everything you're saying is here. But then there's just this one little whiff of like, this tastes like, or this smells like an 18-year-old rye with just a hint of like a 4-year-old rye in it. So I'm a little bit lower than you. I'm going to give it an 8.5 on the nose.
Yeah, and I think the palate, there is a lot of really nice flavors here. I think that youth comes out in a little bit of a straw flavor, but the mint comes through nice and strong. The rye is all there. It's a little bit clovey. Some vanilla really punches through, and it kind of reminded me of like a cream cheese icing that you put on a cinnamon roll.
Mm-hmm.
There are some really nice, beautiful flavors here. And it just confirms to me again that the best ryes out there are a mixture of the really nice, beautiful, minty rye notes with a depth of and richness of flavor with that cream cheese icing and vanilla and a little bit of brown sugar. I think this is a stellar palette that I'm going to give a 9 out of 10 to.
All right, dude, are you ready for this? I think I'm going to have my first really spicy take on BTAC. I'm let down by this, like a lot.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. So I keep a little bottle of whiskey next to our kind of recording station here that I use kind of as my baseline. Like if I don't feel like my palate's quite ready to start tasting whiskey, I'll have just a little sip of that to kind of set a baseline expectation for what whiskey does on my palate. And I drank that, and then I started drinking the BTAC, and this is much more sour. Obviously, it's rye, so like I'm expecting it to have a little bit of those sort of like mint and dill notes. But the youthfulness that I picked up on the nose, which does not make sense. Like, this is 18 years old. It is not young. It carried through to the palate for me. It's a little bit too sour. It's a little bit too grassy. And I think what'd you say? Straw? Straw is a good note here. But it doesn't bring any sort of caramel notes. It doesn't even tip into like dill or mint. It just kind of has a really strong earthy tone. And I feel like the rye grain is swallowed up in this kind of sourness. Now, there was a slight hint of those like grandma strawberry candies that I got. And I was like, oh, interesting. Second sip, it was gone again. I'm really, really disappointed in this, man. I'm just going to give this a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, you are way off from where I'm at, because I think that there are some really beautiful flavors here. I think as I got into the finish, the rye really finishes things out nicely. It turns a little bit vegetal. The leather starts to come through with the age. It has a little bit of an apricot, kind of fruity type of flavor that lingered for a long time. It is a really long, mellow finish that I am all about. I'm sticking in this 9 zone, Bob. I'm at a 9.5 on the finish.
Yeah, man, we have had a lot of really great ryes on this show, and this is just not one of them for me. I mean, it is fine, but it's surprisingly one note, and that note is just kind of grassy. So if you're into an earthy flavor, it does kind of remind me of like an entry-level scotch in that regard. Like it has that sort of earthy barley flavor to it. It just doesn't remind me of a good rye. And it's a little bit bitter, a little bit sour. It has kind of that toasted oak note that I don't like sometimes, where the toast on the char, instead of the char, the toast on the barrel can impart a kind of sour flavor. This is not doing it for me, man. BTAC,
Ugh.
what the hell? 7 out of 10.
Ugh. Jeesh. Yeah, I think balance-wise, we're at a 9 out of 10. I think there's a decent amount of complexity here. It is not the most complex of the BTACs. I would say that so far, this is the least complex.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm only at a 9. But I think the flavors you do get are awesome.
Awesome is a very generous term. And I'm going to say, for me at least, decidedly not awesome. I'm going to go ahead and give this just a 7 out of 10 again. I don't want to tip into value yet. My value score is going to be horrifically low on this, Brad. I mean, can we at least agree that this is a step down from the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I do think that. I think that if this was in the 100 to 110 proof range, it would be much, much better.
I I'm gonna give it.
I'll go ahead.
I'm gonna give it one more sip. This is your last chance, Sazerac, because there's something within me that's like I can't give a $1,500 whiskey this low of a score, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna go into value. I think that this is not as good as the rest of the lineup. It's just too expensive for something that's proofed down to 90.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I don't mind that they proof it down. Like, you lost a lot in evaporation, add a little water, take it from 130 down to 115, 105. But all the way down to 90, I think that it restricts the amount of notes that you can have on it. There's not quite enough complexity. I'm going to give it a 6.5 on value. Like, in the category of luxury whiskey, I think this is an okay value, but not something that's going to knock your socks off.
Yeah, my suspicions are confirmed here. This just has kind of a generically, almost mass-produced vodka kind of flavor profile on the front of the palate, where you can tell that there's ethanol and then some sort of not very well done grain mixture. And then on the back of the palate, it gets really bitter and herbal. And that's fine for some things, but it almost had the effect of like when you and I have met up with our buddy Chris Blattner and done Malort shots with him. Like there's that sort of not even quite black licorice anise, but the super bitter herbs on the back end of a Malort are on the back of my palate right now. This is not great. And I have been giving BTAC a baseline score of 5 out of 10 on value because I just don't think that I can go any lower or higher on any of them. This one has proved me wrong. I can go lower than 5. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10 on value, which is bringing my final score to a 32.5. Brad, where are you?
I am 11 points higher than you. I'm at a 43.5.
I don't know if we've ever had a season where you and I have been so divergent.
Yeah. This is a massive difference in opinion. I mean, I love Ryes. I think that this offers so much of what Rye can do. It just needs to be like 15 proof points higher, and I would be in that upper echelon 45 plus.
I was going to say, our last 2 weeks have been approaching the 90 mark, which is just an excellent whiskey. Not just great, but truly excels. And this week we're at a 38 out of 50 due to my low score. Now, I will say, like, I think that score does represent that both of us agree that this is a step down from the last 2 weeks. Whether you think it's a good whiskey or not, I don't know that this belongs in the price echelon of the other BTAC offerings. Like, I'd probably be a little less harsh on this if this sold for MSRP and not for 10 times MSRP.
Yeah.
But this kind of seems like the odd one out of the lineup so far.
Here, I'm going to be honest with you, Bob. I'm looking back at my scores. I gave the W.L. Weller a 40 out of 50. So while just memory serving me, I feel like I liked the Weller more. I scored it 3.5 points lower than the Rye.
Yeah.
So I do like this Rye a lot. I think it's a really good whiskey.
You know what is good, Brad?
What's that?
Is the 2014 film Whiplash.
Ugh. What a film. What a freaking movie.
We should have used J.K. Simmons' little one-liners as notes on our...
Oh, that would have been perfect, man. Is he like the greatest villain of all time?
He's certainly the most villainous villain.
Oh, he's so good.
All right, man, let's get back into talking with our friend Jordan about Whiplash. What do you say?
Let's get to it. All right, everybody, that was Sazerac Rye from the 2023 batch, a whiskey that hits the spot, but man, that's a lot of money, Bob.
It's a lot of money, man. Didn't quite do it for me. Not quite my tempo, Brad.
No, not quite my tempo.
He does it so good too. The first 6 times, not quite my tempo.
And it's the fact that he does it 6 times. Just completely calm, completely loving.
To the point where and you can tell by the 3rd time he's screwing with him. And then it's right before he jumps up to, were you rushing or were you dragging? Anyway. Well, hey, man, speaking of being right on tempo, your boy is 4-0 this season. at our next game, which we call Two Facts and a Falsehood.
Brad is gonna try to stump you both to all right and what is wrong. Two facts and a falsehood.
Two Facts and a Falsehood is the part of the show where Brad presents me with 3 items as fact about the making of this movie, one of which is a complete lie, and I have to guess which one that is. Now, I have a ringer on hand today, Jordan McCain, expert in parasocial relationships, so hopefully all the questions are about that sort of thing and not actually about the making of the movie.
They're all about family systems theory.
Yes!
Who knew?
Yes!
What does the DSM-5 say about ...
If you asked me a question about why
Guys.
the DSM-4 was better than the DSM-5, I could go on about that all day.
I saw a meme on Instagram the other day that was like, "Girl, you're the kind of girl that they write books about." And the next page was a picture of the DSM-5.
Jordan, has it been
That's
explained
fun.
to you how this process works?
I think so. I think I get it. I'm not going to say anything unless you ask.
Yeah. So Brad is a stickler with this. When we have a guest on the show, I can seek your counsel. But once I seek your counsel, even if I choose a different answer than what you gave me, he considers that I have received your counsel. So if I get the question correct, I get 1 victory. But if I get it wrong, I get 2 losses for having been led astray by our guest.
Yeah, it's kind of like the game show, the 3 doors theory, where if I show you the open door and you switch, you have a higher chance of winning. If you seek advice, you have a higher chance of winning. So there should be some stakes here.
All right. Well, Brad, hit me with your 2 facts and a falsehood.
Fact number 1, director Damien Chazelle took some jazz drumming lessons for 6 months to better understand the intricacies of jazz drumming, as he had already been trained on piano and bass guitar. Fact number 2, though a visual double was used for certain sequences, all of Andrew's drumming was performed by Miles Teller himself to pre-recorded tracks. Approximately 40% of Teller's actual drumming made it into the final soundtrack. Fact number 3, J.K. Simmons brought a personal connection to his role in Whiplash, having his own musical background. His mother was a middle school music teacher, and his father served as the director of the music department at the University of Montana, where J.K. himself earned a degree in music, lending authenticity to his portrayal of his role as Terrence Flesher.
I'm not sure about number 3. Number 2 sounds kind of true, Jordan. And I'm just saying Jordan because I want to bounce ideas off of you as I watch your facial reactions to what I'm saying.
I'm pretty sure that counts as asking for...
No, come on. I haven't asked anything. Let the record reflect. I haven't asked for a thing yet. I am pretty sure that Chazelle was a drummer, not a pianist. And so I'm kind of thinking Brad tried to pull one over on us a little bit. And I'm a little bit tempted to say number 1 is the falsehood, because I'm like 95% sure Chazelle tried to do jazz drumming, was not very good at it, and then gave it up to become a filmmaker.
That's why he needed lessons. Come on, dude. Have you seen La La Land? You see how much piano is in that movie? You're telling me Chazelle is a jazz drummer?
Honestly, here's the thing, guys. I have never not sought the counsel of the guest, mostly because it makes for horrible audio to just talk at the guest and then never allow them to respond. So, Jordan, you're in this with me now. Aside from number 1, did anything else stand out to you as a potential falsehood?
I would agree with you. J.K. Simmons does have a degree in music. And I did know that Miles Teller, I knew he had been drumming. So I think a lot of his stuff was used. I don't know. Number 1 would strike me as the thing I know the least about. That seems the most suspicious to me.
All right. Then I think we're going to lock it in. Brad, I'm staking my reputation, my 4-0 record on this. Number 1 is the falsehood.
Jordan, you were correct. Miles Teller has been drumming since he was 15 years old. So a lot of his stuff was in fact used. And Bob, you were also correct about fact number 1 being the falsehood. I don't know if he was a jazz drummer. I know that he was a jazz musician based on my research.
Well, let's pull it up here and see if it's on his Wikipedia. As I do that, let's get back into talking about the movie, guys. And I said that I was going to spoil my let's make it a double film really early. And I think it's because it is so pertinent to the conversation that we've been having. I'm going to pair this movie with the 8-hour, excessively long documentary, The Last Dance, that came out a couple years ago about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Because, Brad, I've been telling you ever since that documentary came out, first of all, it's an absolute glazed job on Michael Jordan. Like, it was like not objective at all. However, I think it did such a good job of unintentionally giving you an insight into what that mentality does to a person. Jordan just comes across as the most bitter, unforgiving, maladjusted old man who cannot let go of past slights that were either real or invented. And that kind of Mamba mentality that is so often praised among the greats in a sport. You know, Kobe had it, Michael had it. They always say LeBron doesn't have that mentality. And I always look at that and I say, well, like, it kind of seems like some of these guys just have their priorities in line. Like, you can be great at something and not be a horrible person in every other facet of life. And I guess I kind of just want to explore with you guys, why is it that you think, or what is it do you think is so appealing to consumers, to fans, especially in the area of sports, where this obsessive consumed mentality is lauded in a person? And, you know, why do we continue to celebrate it?
I think it's simplicity, man. Like, humans crave simplicity in life. And it's so easy to say, well, they're great because they cut everything else out and they spend all their time in the gym and they don't lose track of what will make them great. They have that killer instinct. And it's just this simple answer that, like, massages the part of our brain that wants everything to be obvious. And I think it's way more than that. And I also think that we celebrate greatness in one area at the expense of a million other areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say in the first half, but Bob, it's so funny you call this a horror film, because I love that you emphasize that, because every time I watch this movie, all I can think of is Andrew did it. Like, he did the thing. Like, he lived up to the expectation. And that's what this will tell you, all the viewers and you guys, everything you need to know about me. All I can think of is, like, he did it. He got to Nirvana or whatever, like, that idea is. And I think it's because competency is authority. And authoritarian structures beget authoritarian structures beget authoritarian structures. So, like, I watched The Last Dance too. Michael Jordan does not come across in a personal way as a good person, but there is not a single basketball player who will ever be like, yeah, but we don't like him.
Right.
Or like he has no say on the game. They're like, no, he's kind of still the king. And that's what they're going to say about Andrew, is he was formed in an authoritarian structure that made him as competent as humanly possible. And someday, if he doesn't kill himself, he will be the king of jazz drumming that some other budding musician's going to listen to in his headphones, right? Just like he was. Like, I want to be like the bird, right? Like, I want to do it. I just think that that's so appealing, depending on how your brain works.
And I just, when I think about this movie, I think about how hard it is for young people to see that life is more than a few moments. Like, at the end of the day, this movie shows Andrew sacrifice family relationships and future, relational, getting a wife relationships. Like, he has sacrificed two of the primary things that our society has said these are paths towards a well-lived life, right? Having a healthy family, finding a good spouse who loves us and cares for us. Like, he sacrifices all those on a path to greatness, And at the end of the day, we saw what might have been his greatest moment ever as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And to chase those singular moments of greatness is to sacrifice a lifetime of well-being and a journey towards health and healing and all these things. And you sacrifice all that for this one moment of greatness where this demon looks on at you with a motherly love. and like, that's freaking terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I keep calling it a horror movie. It's probably not an accident that this movie was produced by Blumhouse Pictures. I don't know if you guys saw that on the credits, but Blumhouse, known for making low-budget horror movies, they have become like the horror studio over the last 10 years. And it's partially because they just find low-budget movies that they believe in, and they end up being super profitable for them. But this movie cost $3.3 million to make. It made $50 million at the domestic box office. Not bad. And I think watching it this time, I'm so impressed with Chazelle, both in like the kinetic camera work of his filmmaking in this movie, but also as a writer. And I think the huge success of this film is that it does not spoon feed you exactly what to think about the people in this movie. J.K. Simmons is an obvious villain. Like, he is one of the most demonic and quite frankly, like, scene-chewing villains in the history of villainy. However, like, you can still have that moment of Andrew did it at the end of the movie. Like, he's on the mountaintop. And it makes me feel even ickier as an audience member that I am rooting for the demise of someone's soul in real time. And Chazelle does such a good job of allowing you to feel the tension of both of those things without telling you which is right to feel and which is wrong to feel. Brad, I'm just wondering, like, from a filmmaking perspective, what were some of the techniques that you noticed this time around? Like, what was Chazelle doing that signaled to the world that he was like a young force to be reckoned with here?
I think it's his ability to hone in on people's faces. Like, anytime a director can draw a beautiful performance out of his actors with super close-ups is always impressive to me. And it's I think it's his sound design. Like, the ability he has to give you these wildly, violently loud moments of musical expression paired with so many quiet moments throughout the film of Andrew having quiet conversations with Melissa, what's her last name? Benoit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or with his dad, Paul Reiser. I think that there's just so many small moments throughout the film that allow the big moments to shine that I think Chazelle is onto something here. And like I said at the start, he never allows anything to distract the camera, the sound design, the acting, the script. Like, nothing distracts from this manic thrust towards the finish line.
Mm-hmm. There's only a few things in the movie, too. If we're talking about the way the movie's shot, it works really well because it's low budget and they do a good job of capturing like the griminess of New York City. But everything has that sickly green hue to it of neon and streetlights. And there's only a couple locations in the whole film that have a different color palette. You see it really early on in the concession stand where his future and then former girlfriend works. And it's because it's like the object of Andrew's desire. It's where he feels the most sense of comfort and longing. And like, that's where he finds, for lack of a better term, like belonging. Like, he wants that girl. And then you find it in the classroom of J.K. Simmons. Like, there is a weird, warm tone to that classroom that doesn't exist anywhere else. And then you finally get it on stage at the end of the movie when he starts his solo and the lighting changes there. And it's like a very obvious use of color, but it also does such a good job at getting into the psychology of this character and how he doesn't feel comfortable anywhere else. He doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere else. He clearly doesn't want to be anywhere else than just in those few places, because he is like putting all of his identity eggs in that basket. All right, guys. I've been going on. Jordan's over here falling asleep. We got to get to Jordan here. And I think in order to do that, it's time for our last segment of the day, which we call Let's Make It a Double.
We're near the end of the episode, so thanks for listening to the Film and Whiskey Show. Let's pair another film with this one, even if it's a struggle. It's our final segment of the day, now let's make it a double.
Let's Make It a Double is the part of the show where we pick a movie to pair up with this one to make the perfect double feature. Jordan, I've already called you out, so we're putting you on the spot here. I've given my Let's Make It a Double. What would you pair Whiplash with?
There are only 3 movies where at the end of the movie, as soon as the credits roll, I have thought to myself, I would really like to watch that again immediately. They are Whiplash, Inception, and then the movie I would suggest for the double feature, if you want a more positive tone, is La La Land. I would pick La La Land. Very similar feel. I love musicals. It'll very much get you into a better headspace. Still like a little bit depressing, but far less of like the manipulation. If I can add a second, since you added The Last Dance, because this popped into my head immediately, if you want to feel just as bad or worse about excellence, I would watch FX's The Bear.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch The Bear, it has a very similar philosophy to pursuing excellence at the expense of yourself. And it is just as intense and it feels just as icky at times, but then there are still those moments of like, these are the greatest chefs ever and they're going to do it. Mm-hmm. Like they're going to nail it.
Yep.
And it's going to be amazing. It's just a really fun way to watch it. So I would go in either of those directions, just depending on how you're feeling.
All right, Brad. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Those were some good picks.
I didn't know where else to put this in, Bob, but do you want to know when I knew that Andrew Neiman was like the real protagonist of the movie?
I do not.
It's the moment when he looked at his father and said, I don't want the Raisinets. I'll just eat around them. I was like, take that, Bob. Raisinets suck.
Dude, Raisinets are really good. The fact that you haven't even tried them to form your opinion is what's most frustrating about it. You're like, they suck, and I am basing that on nothing but vibes.
Yes, 100%. That is what our country runs on, Bob. If I were to pair this with another film, it is going to be depressing. It is going to be manipulative. It is going to be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, interesting. What's your reasoning there?
Nurse Ratched.
Oh yeah, good one. Okay. I was thinking the Jack Nicholson route. I was like, yeah, I don't think anybody in this movie gets lobotomized, do they? But yeah. Great pick. All right, so we've got some really good explorations of the human psyche. We've got One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We've got The Last Dance, La La Land, and The Bear for your Let's Make It a Double options.
Let's make it a quintuple.
Yeah, right. Today's Let's Make It a Double was brought to you by Blackwood Distilling Company, Kentucky's distillery specializing in toasted barrel, bourbon, and rye. No matter what movie you pick, you can always make it a double with Blackwood Distilling Co. Brad, let's get into final scores here. There are tiny, tiny flaws in this film. There were like maybe 1 or 2 scenes where I thought, oh, maybe they could have taken a different line reading from Miles Teller, or maybe we shouldn't have had him get hit by a semi-truck. But even the semi-truck thing, which I thought would be a hang-up for me, in the context of watching it this time, I was like, no, that's like the next logical step on his quest to make it to the thing on time. This is a 10 out of 10, dude.
This is a perfect movie. Like you said, no 10 out of 10 movie we have ever scored that way is actually a perfect movie, because there is no such thing as a truly perfect movie. But when you look at the story that this is telling, the underlying philosophy that it's examining, the economy of film usage to get this in under an hour and 40 minutes, this is a hell of a movie, Bob, and it's easily a 10 out of 10 for me.
Watch Jordan just come in here and be like, yeah, it's a 6.5.
I don't know. I'd give it like a solid 3. No. No, it's been in my top 5, top 10. I don't know, whatever ranking systems we all use, but I go back to it frequently. It's one of those when you really want to get back in touch with good storytelling, you just kind of tap it on the shoulder and learn. And good character development. There are some movies with great cinematography, great story, maybe not the best characters, but this is a very much a character-driven drama that just really hits you where it counts.
Wait, did you give it a score?
I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Solid 10 out of 10.
Sure. I heard the descriptiveness, but I need a number, man. This is a quantitative podcast.
I don't believe in numbers.
Yes.
I'd give it a Caravan out of Claire de Lune.
Yep. How many times have you guys been in the shower since watching this movie though, and just started being like da 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 ba ba da 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 bum ba 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 ba? It's so freaking good. It's.
I'll tell you a shameful fact is after the last time I watched this movie with Brad and some other guys, I bought an electric drum set, and I'm an amateur drummer ever since, because I was just like, it just makes something happen for me to be able to do it. So I cannot play any of those riffs or anything, but it is a magical feeling.
I so want to watch a cut of this movie where they just CGI in an electric drum set instead of a real kit. And so you just hear that's all you hear the whole time.
Slapping sound.
Yeah.
It would be a lot of slapping. There'd just be a slapping sound.
Guys, this has been Whiplash. We want to say thank you again to our friend Jordan McCain. Jordan, don't stay away for 5 years next time, man. This was wonderful. It's good to see you.
You let me know. I'm always available.
We always offer this to other guests. Is there anything big coming down the line for you? Where can we find you, Jordan?
Another kid on the way? What's going on?
I'm barely present on social media. Don't look for me. This is the most exposure I've had in a long time.
Well, Brad, we are going to continue a small run of movies with one word in the title next week with the 2019 Best Picture winner. We're talking about Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. So join us for Parasite next week. If you want to let us know what you think of Whiplash, by the way, you can find us on any of our social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, @FilmWhiskey.
Or you can join the conversation on Discord, a platform where the conversations stay private and we have an opportunity to talk about things that we all love and care about, like movies, whiskey, and almost anything else. So if you want to join the conversation, you can find a link at the end of any single one of our show notes.
Join us for Parasite next week. Happy Halloween, everybody. And until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.